LA Metro Magazine podcast is here to bring you the entertaining, informative, and inspiring stories of the people who live, work, and play in the greater Lewiston-Auburn, Maine area. I'm your host, Colby Michaud. On this special Veterans Day edition, we sit down with Charlie Summers, who currently serves in the Navy Reserve and was recently appointed President and CEO of the Maine Energy Marketers Association, also known as MEMA. Charlie takes us on a journey through his diverse professional experience, sheds light on MEMA's technical school MTech, and gives his own perspective on what it means to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces. This is LA Metro Magazine Podcast, Episode 15. Well, hello, Charlie.
It's great to be with you this morning.
We appreciate you taking the time to be on LA Metro Magazine Podcast.
Yeah.
This special Veterans Day edition specifically. So let's get right into it.
All right.
You're newly appointed the president of MEMA, the Maine Energy Marketers Association, but you have a vast background in military experience and other things. So if you could sort of take us back in time and where you grew up in Maine and then your career from there. Yeah, that's fine.
Well, actually, I did not grow up in Maine. I grew up in a small town in Illinois, near Peoria, Illinois. My hometown is named Kewanee, Illinois, and I went to everything, from kindergarten all the way through junior high school and high school, and then went to community college in Kewanee, and then transferred to the University of Illinois. After I left the University of Illinois, I moved to Maine and took a job in the hotel industry. My family had owned hotels. I worked in hotels and thought that would be my career path, and came to Bangor and was the assistant manager of the Bangor Motor Inn, and later worked for the same company in southern Maine as the manager of their lounge at the South Portland Motor Inn, which is now the Days Inn, and enjoyed it very, very much. It was a lot of fun, but I decided I wanted to go out on my own, and I actually, of all things, I opened a convenience store in Biddeford, Maine. I started it, ran it, worked it what seemed like 9 days a week, and in retrospect, it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. Not only was I able to get the experience of running a business and selling a business and everything that is associated with that, but the relationships that you're able to form at that point in my life were fantastic. And my late wife, who was a university professor at the University of New England, and before that, University of Maine, she was at UNE, and I was running a store in Biddeford, and we had 2 young children, and it was just looking back at it, it was just a really wonderful time down there. And I shouldn't say down there, southern Maine. But it was a wonderful time, and really one that provided me, again, with a lot of great experience. And then from there, I had the opportunity to get involved in state politics. Although I never thought that I would start by running for the state senate, but I did in 1990. It's been 30 years now since I ran for the state senate, and back then it was District 31, and it was comprised of all of Scarborough, all of Saco, all of Old Orchard Beach, and all of Dayton. And we really put a campaign team together that was, I'll be generous and say inexperienced, but we worked very, very hard and knocked on thousands and thousands of doors, and on Election Day in 1990 I was elected and served 2 terms in the state senate. Enjoyed that very, very much, and then I later went to work for Senator Olympia Snowe as her state director, and I served her for 9 years. And after that, ran for the United States Congress. Was not successful, but ended up being the regional administrator of the U.S. Small Business Administration. Had a great experience there and truly enjoyed it. But sort of in the middle of all of that, I got an invitation from Uncle Sam for an all-expenses-paid trip to the Middle East, and as a member of the United States Navy, and got sent to Baghdad and served in Baghdad as a public affairs officer, and really enjoyed it. It was a great experience. I mean, obviously, it was a pretty intense time, a very potent time to be there in 2007, 2008. But again, one that you learn a lot, not only about your shipmates or your battle buddies or your wingmen, but you learn a lot about yourself in that process too. And it's one of those things that if you're fortunate enough to be able to look back on it, you can kind of look at it and realize how it kind of formed your outlook on the world a little bit. I've always obviously been a very patriotic feeling person, but when you are in an area like Iraq and you have the chance to meet Iraqis and work with Iraqis and travel the country, you see certainly, there were elements of it that were very beautiful. Others were kind of tough, but it gave you a keen appreciation for what we have here in the United States and the standard of living, the standard of opportunity in the United States to really set your own course and do what you want to do. And it's just really, I think, unique among all nations in the world. The United States is a very, very special place, and you feel very lucky to have been in uniform, to serve your country in uniform. And when you come home, I often said it was a little bit like Technicolor when I got home, because in the Middle East it's very brown and kind of drab at times. And I remember coming back to Maine, and it was in, I think, May or June of 2008, and the trees were in bloom, and the grass, and it was just like you had this sensory overload for a period of time, both in terms of the aesthetics, but in terms of being back with your family and being back, doing what you love. So I enjoyed that very much. Later, after that, I went back to the Middle East and was in Bahrain for a short period of time, and then got assigned to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, working for him on his public affairs team. That was, at the time, Admiral Mike Mullen. And another tremendous experience. He's a really great man, and you learned a lot from him in the process. And during that time period, I got sent to Afghanistan and was over there and had some interesting experiences in Afghanistan as well. But all other than my wife, my family, my kids, I wouldn't trade it. It was just a great time, and then came back and. Came back, I worked for myself for a short period of time, then was elected Secretary of State here in Maine, another tremendous job. I always said, my career, I obviously have a very short attention span, because I've moved.
I can relate.
I've moved, from a lot of different jobs to military jobs and back in the private sector. But, all of it, I think, I've been fortunate because it's given me a broad appreciation for not only small business and running a small business, working in a small business, but serving in elected office, both at a district level and a state level, running for higher office, and unfortunately not being successful, but that's okay. In the state of Maine, it's really, I think, unique among all the other 50 states that an individual, whether it's me or anyone else, can, if they really want to get involved and really try to enter the public arena and public debate, you can do it in Maine. And it's still one of these states where relationships matter, where handshakes matter, where door knocking matters. And I've often said that my time in the Maine Senate, certainly my time as Secretary of State, Mainers do not hesitate to tell you what they think of you, right? And you better stand there and take it.
Very frank.
No, yeah, and that's fine. I would rather know what somebody's thinking than have to guess. And all the people I ever dealt with, I never had to guess. If they were unhappy with me, I knew it. And if they were happy with me, most of the time they'd tell you. So it's a tremendous experience and one that I would encourage anybody to get involved in, regardless of their party affiliation. I think the chance to serve your country, or I should say serve your state in public office is a great thing, and the chance to serve your country in uniform. My wife, she served in the Navy as well, and she's out now. I'm still in the reserve. But I'll always talk to young people about serving the military, serving the Navy, and my wife is convinced that if I can recruit one more, I get a free T-shirt out of the deal.
That's awesome. So obviously a very diverse background.
Yeah.
And from the business owner to running for public office and the military piece. Could you pinpoint in each individual of those categories a different lesson from each of those times?
Sure. I mean,
and maybe there's one commonality that sort of threads
I think the commonality is that, at least for me, everything I've done in my life has been relationship driven. In working in the hotel business, growing up in the hotel business, you don't think about it, but you really are developing relationships every day and strengthening relationships with your customers and your vendors and so forth. And when I was at the Bangor Motor Inn, there was a tremendous opportunity to kind of meet the people who make Maine's economy turn, the salesmen, the people who are on the road, the saleswomen that are on the road. You met them in a more relaxed atmosphere where you could talk to them if they needed something, you could get it for them, and you see what they do, and you see how the economy obviously affects us all, but you could watch your monthly salespeople coming in, and you knew if they had a good month, you knew if they had a so-so month, and you knew if they had a down month. And the ability to kind of work in that arena is one I've always enjoyed, and I always, in the back of my mind, kind of think that, boy, it'd be great to be back in the hotel business and things like that. But and then of course, those lessons transferred into my own business, and then transferred into politics, particularly in politics. Obviously, you try to get to know your constituency, get to know what businesses, or where the businesses are and what they do and what they manufacture or what they sell. And then working for Senator Snow, again, the same thing, working at the U.S. Small Business Administration, when I had responsibility for all 6 New England states, from going from northern Maine to Vermont to New Hampshire to Connecticut to Rhode Island to Massachusetts, and looking at just the kind of colloquial differences, right? In Massachusetts as opposed to Maine, or in Maine as opposed to Connecticut. They're very, very kind of different constituencies, but all with a similar interest, obviously. And for the U.S. Small Business Administration, making sure they have the access to capital and the counseling and training necessary to be successful. That was a great, really a great time, a great opportunity. And of course, serving the military. Although you don't it's not as maybe outwardly relationship driven, but over the course of time, again, you realize the people that you've met and served with 10 or 15 years earlier, suddenly you're serving with them again, and you know them, and that really kind of contributes to the whole team atmosphere. So,
yeah,
and
cool.
Now today, at MEMA,
Right.
I probably should have given a commercial for MEMA when I first started here, so I hope my board doesn't get upset with me. But Maine Energy Marketers, I worked with Gene Guilford when it was Maine Oil Dealers Association way back when I was in the legislature. Worked with Jamie Pye when he was here, and now to be able to be the head of the association, I think is fantastic, because you look at what this industry does for the state of Maine, and the number of entrepreneurs and small businesses that we represent. And with our school, MTech, the Maine Technical Education Center, it's what a great thing to be involved with, because you can truly, no kidding, watch young men, young women come in. Maybe they've had experience in oil burner repair or gas furnaces or heat pumps. Maybe they've had that. Oftentimes they haven't had any, and they come from the mid-coast area, they come from the Lewiston-Auburn area, they come from northern Maine, from southern Maine. And in a few short months, they can go from maybe having no experience to suddenly having their HVAC license. And I watched it, and about 3 weeks ago, we graduated a class, and the weather was still pretty warm, pretty nice, and we did it outside. And there were literally a dozen employers standing in our parking lot. And as soon as these men and women got their diplomas or their certificates, if you will, these employers came in and said, "Okay, I want you to come to work for us." And these are going from maybe they transitioned out of the military, came to us, went through the program, and when they started, they really weren't sure if this is what was going to be for them, weren't sure what they were going to do with their lives as they move forward, but went through the program, and immediately after graduating, were offered jobs, paying $45,000, $50,000 a year with benefits. I mean, bang, just like that, inside of 4 or 5 months, taken care of. And that's a pretty heady thing to watch and to see. And you feel so grateful to be a part of that and try to help move the school along. I can't tell your listeners strongly enough, if they have a young man or young woman, or maybe somebody mid-career, or so, like we said, somebody coming out of the military that would like to come to Maine or come back to Maine and they're wondering what they can do, look at the Maine Technical Education Center. Just go to Maine Energy Marketers Association.com, and you'll see MTech, Maine Technical Education Center, on our website. They can click through that, and they can figure out just exactly what the process is to apply, to get enrolled, to go to our classes, and really kind of start their journey on being the next generation of technicians for the heating industry. And there are a lot of changes going on, whether you're talking about heat pumps, electric heat pumps, whether you're talking about biofuels, which are going to be just an absolute key component of Maine's energy future. I just toured Biofine, which is a company in it's in Orono. It's associated with the University of Maine right now. Biofine manufactures from wood waste, from sawdust and wood chips, or even garbage, a chemical called ethyl levulamate. And ethyl levulamate is a carbon neutral product, and it can be added to heating oil to create biofuel, and it will help to reduce the greenhouse gases, the carbon emissions, and it can put people back to work in Maine. In the paper industry that has been hit so hard over the last several decades, we can put people back to work by manufacturing EL, as they call it, ethyl levulamate. Mm-hmm. And we can put people back to work, which is good for our economy. This is good for our environment. And it's really a Maine-based product. And once again, Maine is kind of leading the way. We look back over our history, and whether you're talking about Joshua Chamberlain at Little Round Top, or you're talking about Margaret Chase Smith or Ed Muskie, Mainers have always kind of led the way. And here we go again, this time in the field of biofuels.
And you were talking about how MTech is great for many different people,
yep,
regardless of their background or their age. Why is it especially great for military veterans? Well,
when you have served in the military, and those who are listening to us, they'll, I think, understand what I'm talking about. There's a real kind of a team atmosphere. You always feel like you're working together towards a common goal, whether it's when you're in the Middle East or here back in the United States, or maybe you're in the Pacific, and they call it the pivot to the Pacific Rim these days, and the great power competition between the United States and China and Russia. I mean, you always feel like you're kind of working towards a common goal, and oftentimes when men and women leave the military, the thing that they miss the most is that sense of teamwork. And here at MTech, the Maine Technical Education Center, they get back in that team atmosphere where we can walk through the school after this, and you can see they kind of get together in little pods, and suddenly they have their, and I'll say quote unquote, teammate with them. They're working through problems and projects as it relates to HVAC. And I think that military members are very well suited for this type of atmosphere and this type of a career, because again, they feel like they're working in a team atmosphere, and then once they graduate, they can feel like what they're doing is making a difference not only in their customers' lives, but it's making a difference in their lives, and their families' lives, and their children's lives. And when it works like that, and we've seen it time and time again coming out of MTech, it strengthens their local communities, and it strengthens our state, which I think is good for everybody involved. So MTech is a great asset to not only Mid-Coast Maine, but the state of Maine.
And how does MTech differ from other trade schools in Maine? Well,
I think MTech is really at the forefront for technical education, for HVAC, because we have the professionals that have worked in this industry for years and years, but have continued to always move forward and not simply be stuck, in one aspect of it, stuck just on oil burners or stuck just on propane, but they're embracing the next technology constantly and constantly updating our curriculum and constantly making sure that we're at the forefront, so that when people come to MTech and they get their certificate in HVAC or oil burners or gas, they're ready to go. They're ready to hit the ground running. And again, that's, I think, borne out by the number of employers that are literally waiting in our parking lot for the men and women who are graduating to get their certificates. And once they do, they come in and they say, come on, let's go. And that will change a person's life, like I said, within a matter of months. They go from maybe not knowing exactly what they're going to do. In the case of the military, if they're transitioning out of the military, they know what they did in the military. They don't know how that transfers over into the civilian world necessarily, but suddenly they get into MTech and boom, they're as they say in the military, you hit the ground running, right? And that's exactly what they do.
Yeah, sort of it's a fast track to success.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And again, it's that entrepreneurial feeling too, because many of these men and women that graduate, they go on and run their own business eventually, and then they're the ones kind of turning the crank that makes Maine's economy run. And that's a great thing, because it not only gives them that sense of accomplishment, but it vests them in Maine's economic future. And that's what we need. That's what we want. And the great thing about this industry, this is not a regulated industry. This is not like Central Maine Power and the electric industry. This is a private business, and it ebbs and flows on what the customer wants. If they want a heat pump, we react to that. If they want gas, we react to that. If they want oil, we react to that. If they want cleaner burning oil, we're leaning into the biofuels like we were talking about with ethyl butamate. That is going to be, I think, the biofuel of the future, and Biofine is going to make a huge difference in this market here in Maine. In fact, we just met with Congresswoman Pingree a few minutes ago via Zoom and briefed her on where we are with that, and she has been very encouraging and very supportive in our efforts.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Everyone has heard that laughter is the best medicine, but did you know it can improve your health? Hi, I'm Nicole, Association Director of Health, Wellness, and Fitness at the YMCA of Auburn-Lewiston, to remind you why laughing is actually good for your health. A good hearty laugh relieves physical tension and stress. Laughter decreases stress hormones and increases infection-fighting antibodies. Laughter releases endorphins, the body's feel-good chemicals. Nothing diffuses anger or conflict faster than a shared laugh. Laughter improves and increases blood flow, which can help protect you against cardiovascular problems. Make laughter a part of each day. People who incorporate humor and play into their daily lives find that it renews them in all their relationships. For more health and wellness tips and to learn more about the YMCA of Auburn-Lewiston, visit us online at alymca.org or stop by and see us.
let's switch gears and go back to talking about you again.
Oh, gee. You can tell I used to get paid by the word. And I never worked cheap, right?
Right. You're at the helm here at MEMA, but you're also, as you said earlier, still in the reserves.
Yes.
What are you doing with that in the reserves?
I'm a public affairs officer, meaning we deal with media both on a local, state, well, I said both, but on multiple levels, in local, state, national, international media. Most recently, before I joined the team here at MEMA, I was working at the Pentagon, working for the Secretary of Defense, first Jim Mattis when he was Secretary of Defense, and then most recently Mark Esper as Secretary of Defense. And I was part of his public affairs team. So we dealt with national media every single day, all day long. And it was a great experience, and it dovetailed very nicely with what I do in the Navy as a public affairs officer. Because again, you're dealing with many of the same people that I worked with when I was in the civilian capacity at the Pentagon. And I have a reserve unit that I'm the commanding officer of, based in California, in Coronado at North Island. And we have communications professionals from all over the country that are part of this unit. It's probably one of the best units I've been involved with. And now I'm working on 25 years in the Navy and Navy Reserve. Which is, by the way, I have no idea how 25 years, or almost 25 years, have passed that quickly. But working with a tremendously talented group of people, we have responsibility, throughout the Pacific Rim, and it's a lot of fun. It's I can't kid you. I mean, I really enjoy it. There are times, like anything, it can be very challenging, very frustrating. But it's, again, it kind of goes back to that team atmosphere that I was talking about a few minutes ago. The people that I'm serving with now, some of them I've known for 20 plus years, and our paths these kind of intersect every so often. But it's great because it's particularly in Navy public affairs, it's a very small community. So I think there are maybe a total of 225 officers nationwide. So there aren't many of us in the reserve, but you get to work on every platform that the Navy has, be it in surface or in air. When I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, it was kind of odd for the Navy to be in the desert, but we were. And as a result, you got to work with folks in the Air Force and the Army and the Marine Corps and Coast Guard. So it's really, it's been something I truly enjoy, and I'm honored every time I can put the uniform on.
Yeah, that is admirable for sure. I'm just curious, how do you have the time to do all these things?
You don't think about it.
You don't.
And well, first you do think about it, but my wife Ruth, she and I, we met in the Navy, and she served for 11 years, and we were talking before we went on the air. Her father, he was in the Marine Corps, went to Annapolis and served in the Marine Corps, so she kind of has been very familiar with the military and what it's like to be a military family. So I've been very blessed. I mean, she's wonderful. My kids, they're wonderful. Both my older two and my younger son, Thomas, he's 11 years old, goes to St. Bridget's School. I'll give a commercial for St. Bridget's School in Portland. It's a great school, and he loves it. My older two, Tricia and Chaz, Tricia lives in New York, she and her husband, and they have a little boy. I have a grandson, Ollie, and they have another one on the way. And my older son, Chaz, and his wife, Joanna, they live in Portugal, run a business in Portugal, and export hotel furnishings all over the place. And they have a little boy, Charlie. So we've got Charlie the Fourth going on in our family, in fact, my son was just back a few weeks ago working on a project here, so I hadn't seen him in a while, so it was great to see him. I don't mean to kind of digress here, but my family, both my older kids and my little guy Tom, they kind of grown up in this as well, so they understand when I have to go off and if whether it was serving in Iraq or serving in Afghanistan or serving at the Pentagon, they've kind of grown up around it, and they sort of understand that battle rhythm, and they're very, very supportive and very understanding. So I'm fortunate. That's how it works. Ruth somehow is kind of the glue that holds it all together.
Going back in time, part of your family serve in the military as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gosh, going back to the Revolutionary War, members of my family have always served in the military, and more recently, my grandfather and my great uncle, they were both in World War I, and my uncle got mustard gassed a little bit and got sent home, but my grandfather was in two of the biggest battles, the Meuse-Argonne and the St. Mihiel, and thankfully he made it through, or I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. And then my father served in the Army during the Korean War, and my uncle was in the Army in World War II and the Korean War. My oldest sister served in the Marine Corps. My older brother served in the Marine Corps, and I'm in the Navy. So there's kind of a long line of people from the Somerset.
Very long. Yeah. All the way back, if you said Revolutionary War, that's pretty amazing. Yeah. You can trace that back.
Yeah. In fact, my father actually has a flag that my great uncle carried in the Civil War, and it has bullet holes in it, and he has it, and every once in a while, usually right around Veterans Day or Memorial Day, he'll bring it out and unfold it, and you can take a look at it, and it's pretty interesting.
Are you a history buff?
Oh, I enjoy history. I read a lot of history. Yeah, and when I worked for Secretary Mattis, he was always fond of saying that there's really nothing new under the sun. If you he would say, if you're concerned about what's happening in China or concerned with what's happening in Russia, he said, go back and read your history books, and you'll see similar circumstances, and you can look at it, and you'll know what to do.
Mm-hmm. History repeats itself. Yeah.
Well, in many ways it does, yes.
Mm-hmm. Patterns, at least.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious when you had the calling to join and serve in the military, why you chose Navy versus other branches?
Well, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Growing up, my mother and dad ran a hotel and a restaurant and a bar, and so all my brothers and sisters, we all worked in the business themselves. And of course, my father had served in the military, and almost every adult male that I knew growing up had served in World War II. And then, later, a lot of the younger ones had served either in Korea or Vietnam. And for me, it was just something you always kind of thought you were going to do. It wasn't, you didn't have to stop and really contemplate it for a long period of time. It's just, that's kind of what you did. I mean, no one ever told me I had to do it, but it was just something that I wanted to do. And when I was in college, I'd actually looked into joining the Marine Corps PLC program, platoon leaders class, and was in the process of kind of starting the paperwork. And then I met, I'll say a woman, and the prospect of spending the summer with her, or spending the summer, in North Carolina, with the Marines, I chose the girl, and I've never been sorry, because that was my late wife. She and I, we were married, and unfortunately, I lost her, but 24 years ago. But so we got married and had children, and I kind of thought my opportunity to serve maybe had passed me, but it would always come back to me. And when I was in the state legislature, a friend of mine, Jeff Butland, he's passed away as well, but he was in the Marine Corps Reserve, and he started talking to me about being in the Reserve, and I looked into it, and he mentioned the Navy Reserve, and so I looked into that and made application and got in, and it's been absolutely fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Since this is this episode specifically about veterans and Veterans Day, I was doing a little bit of thinking about this beforehand. The U.S. celebrates two major holidays for the military. Memorial Day, obviously, the other one.
Yeah.
But I think, including myself, sometimes we can get confused in what the differences between those two are. And so I just would like to quickly read a small paragraph from defense.gov.
Yeah.
It reads, Memorial Day is a time to remember those who gave their lives for our country, particularly in battle or from wounds they suffered in battle. Veterans Day honors all of those who have served the country in war or peace, dead or alive, although it's largely intended to thank living veterans for their sacrifices.
Yeah. I think anyone who has served the country in uniform, there's kind of a bond, and it doesn't matter if you were a Green Beret or Navy SEAL, or if you're someone who worked on airplanes as a mechanic. I mean, you have that bond. One thing that I worked on when I was on active duty with the Navy, I worked for the Chief of Navy Reserve, Vice Admiral Robin Braun, who was since retired. But I was there when we had the 100th anniversary of the Navy Reserve, and we were out in California, and I met I think he was 92 or 3-year-old former Navy SEAL. He was actually a flag officer, an admiral, and he was sitting there talking with a young sailor that had just gotten out of boot camp. And you could look at them side by side, and you realize that there were, probably 7 or 8 decades separating the two, probably 7 decades separating the two. But there, you could see the bond, because they both sat down, and there were certain things they could say or things they could point to, and both of them understood it. And I think military service in particular, it knows no generational boundaries. It's something that whether you served last week or served 50 years ago. I mean, my father, he still talks about his time in the Army as being one of the highlights of his life. He remembers, he's told me the story a million times, that he had just gotten in the Army, and they were, I think, being inducted, and there was an Army major that got up to speak to him, and he said, this will be one of the highlights of your life. And at the time, my dad didn't think too much of it, but looking back, I mean, he absolutely says that. And so there's a kind of a special, brotherhood or sisterhood, or however you want to characterize it, that exists with people who've served. And I mean, there are so many people that have done so many amazing things that really deserve to be recognized for. And the fact that my wife or myself can at least say that we serve too, it's a great sense of pride. I think it was President Kennedy. He was speaking to the midshipmen at Annapolis in 1961 or 62, and there's a famous quote. He said that at the time, this is back in the 60s, but he said, any man who may be asked in this century what he did to make his life worthwhile can respond with a good deal of pride and satisfaction, I served in the United States Navy. And I think you can amend that to say any man or woman, who wonders what they did to make their life worthwhile, can say they served in the United States military. And it's, the opportunities to serve are multitude, the jobs. Yeah, not everybody is a trigger puller. I'm a public affairs officer. There are medical officers, there are dental officers, there are human resources types. I mean, there are just so many different facets of the military that afford people unique opportunities to serve. And if anyone listening to this is thinking about serving, please, talk to a recruiter, talk to someone. And very few will ever say they regret it. It's just a tremendous thing to do, and it's a tremendous way to give back to your country. But in giving back, you get a ton. I mean, you get a ton in terms of education, in terms of not just in terms of education or benefits, but just in personal satisfaction.
Yeah. Well said, sir. And although I didn't serve in the military,
Well, you should. I get, like I said, if I can talk you into it, I get a free T-shirt.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Because my father served in the Air Force for 20 years. Our family, my sister and I, we have military brats. We are, quote unquote. And so I can sort of relate to when you talked about the highlight, your father's highlight, of his life was military, serving the Army. Though I see that I have, many more years, hopefully, to experience. The indirect experience of being in the military via my dad was invaluable. We got to travel the world and see many cultures, and it just gives you a completely different perspective. And you're right about the sense of community that's so unique to the military lifestyle. And I mean, we actually had my dad on the podcast way back, and when this first came out, and reminiscing about those times. And it was just, if we could go back, we would. It was a great time.
Oh yeah, it's again, I growing up, every male and many of the females that were adults when I was a little kid, they'd all served, and they would all talk about it. And I can remember my mother and dad's hotel, they would have reunions where the Marine Corps League would come in, or some other branch, and they'd have a convention, and all these guys and gals would come out of all from all over the Midwest and beyond that, and you could see them all get together, and they maybe only saw each other once every year or once every 5 years, but you could tell that, I mean, it's like they just immediately picked up from where they were the time before. And in things that you do in life, it's not always that way, but it certainly is with the military. And again, I just feel very fortunate to have been a tiny part of it. But what I wanted to ask you is, would your dad be upset if I convinced you to join the Navy?
I don't think so.
Okay.
He might prefer Air Force, but
okay. Well, Air Force. I've served with a lot of Air Force personnel, and the Air Force is always a great place to visit for me. I mean, they gave me rides out of places that were not too terribly pleasant, and I appreciated that. And they used to have, I think it was Air Force recruiting commercials. They said it was a great way of life, and I think that's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was younger, I was definitely considering joining. Yeah. When you grow up as a kid and you're constantly surrounded by planes flying overhead, you can't help but want to be in the cockpit of one of those someday. And that sort of like bred my love for aviation. And
what did your father do in the Air Force?
He spent a lot of his time in the services squadron. He did a lot of work with like setting up camps and lodging and food services and recreation. Actually, he started at Loring Air Force Base doing the fitness center.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man.
And you talk about the variety of jobs. I mean,
recently, I mean, you probably know where Great Pond is in Maine. That used to be Dow. It was Dow Recreation Center. It's out Route 9, going out of Bangor. And it's just a beautiful area where the Air Force owned it for years and years. And then a few years back, the Navy bought it, and it's called Great Pond Military Recreation Center.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's really a beautiful area, and we were just up there a couple of months ago, and spent the weekend. It was great. Had a good time. But I was wondering if your dad had been involved with that.
I don't know. I'll ask him.
Yeah.
I'll ask him for sure. I think with that, I mean, sort of over our time here, but it's been awesome talking to you, Charlie, and it's pretty clear that MEMA has a great leader.
I appreciate that very much, but whether you're talking about Hannah or Jen or Brian or Krista or Megan, Dan, Don, all the folks that work here, it's a great group of people. And again, being able to work with people who they work with their hands, they're out every day in the public, and to kind of be back in that setting is tremendous. And there are a lot of challenges for this industry, both in terms of reducing, the carbon emissions, but this industry, historically, going back to when people heated their homes with coal, then they moved to oil, which is a little bit cleaner, and then they moved to low sulfur oil, and then they moved to more efficient furnaces. And this industry has always been at the forefront. It's always, as you say in the military, they're always leaning forward. And they're always trying to improve and get the best technologies and make sure that the products that they sell, that we represent, are the best products, and the people who work on them are the best trained. And that's why MEMA is such a important organization to the state of Maine. The Maine Energy Marketers, representing oil dealers and propane dealers and wholesalers and just a variety of other associate members. These are the people that make the Maine economy work. And when you combine that with MTech, the Maine Technical Education Center, and by the way, I'll just remind your listeners, if they go to mainenergymarketers.com and then click on the MTech, Maine Technical Education Center button, they can learn all about our school. And we're educating the next generation of technicians with the highest and best technologies and the best customer service that we can possibly produce. So I'm fortunate, my whole family is fortunate to be able to be kind of part of the MEMA family, if you will, and I look forward to it, and I just appreciate the chance to spend some time with you.
And happy to be back in Maine, I'm sure, too, right?
Oh, gosh, yeah. To be able to be in your own bed every night, that's a nice thing. I was telling somebody before you came in, the chance just to kind of go out on my back deck and drink a cup of coffee in the morning, even if it's cold, is a really, really nice thing. And it makes you realize how special this state is.
Yep. Well, thank you, Charlie, for your time today and your service. And really appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you today and happy to talk to you anytime.
My thanks to Charlie for taking the time out of his busy schedule to chat with us. Veterans Day is a good time to remember that our freedom isn't guaranteed. It is protected by the men and women in our armed forces. To those who secure our way of life, thank you. I'd also like to take this opportunity to personally thank two very special individuals in my life who served in the U.S. Air Force, my father and my grandfather. To Dad and Pepe, thank you for your service. It's so appreciated. A big shout out to the YMCA of Auburn-Lewiston for sponsoring this program. You can find out more about them at alymca.org. Subscribe to this podcast wherever you prefer to listen. That way you don't miss out on any future episodes. Positive vibes and well wishes from all of us at LA Metro Magazine. Until next time, I'm your host, Colby Michaud. Make sure you're being entertained, staying informed, and getting inspired.